Welcome to the Daily Agenda. Now, try as I might, for decades, in fact, I've been struggling to find a positive aspect to the so-called special relationship Britain has with the United States, or more to the point, the US administration. What is the benefit of that special relationship? Now, when Boris Johnson was ousted, his farewell speech, he said, stick close to the Americans, stick close to the Americans. Because Britain, having become the decrepit pensioner of the US administration, simply has no worldview beyond becoming I say becoming, we have become a subservient, decrepit pensioner of the US administration, and from which we benefit in what way? Economically, how do we benefit? Well, if we ended the so-called special relationship, which is just completely one way, it's a mythical fantasy, quite frankly, which Whitehall seems to harbour. I don't think it extends throughout the rest of the country. If we ended that special relationship, so-called, in other words, this subservient lackey routine to the US administration, in what way would that not benefit the country? Well, it would benefit the country enormously, would it not? Because we would no longer be dragged into one crazy American war after the other, which always ends in a contrived defeat of some description and loads of, money laundering. Does it not? The military-industrial complex benefits entirely from these constant wars, these foreign wars, these Zionist wars, quite frankly, these regime change operations throughout the Middle East, and even Ukraine. Ukraine is an absolutely unmitigated disaster, which every serious person at the time warned was going to be a disaster, and we've always maintained that position. And the globalists went ahead with it. The globalists are another Washington power base, that's right, the Zio globalists, based in Washington. Britain, its faithful little lackey, follows it everywhere, toadying around the world, the decrepit pensioner that just can't accept that it's a decrepit pensioner and thinks it's still a young man and wants to get involved in every single war that the United States starts. The United States carries out the regime change operations which lead to these wars. How does that benefit us? How much have we wasted on the Ukraine war so far? How much has Die Stürmer, committed to give Ukraine every year? Was it 3 billion, was it? Absolutely. For what material benefit to Britain? Because there is absolutely no imminent or long-term threat of a Russian invasion of the so-called United Kingdom. And Russia has actually been bogged down on the Eastern Front in southeast Ukraine for over 3 years. Yes, the war is going very badly for Ukraine, but the war of attrition continues. And so therefore the possibility of any form of land invasion of the UK is nonsense. Airstrikes also nonsense. So how does it benefit this country to be involved in US wars of aggression, regime change operations? It doesn't benefit us. How does it benefit us to be forever following the US administration, which is under the control of IPAC or APAC man, whichever way you want to put it, and American friends of Israel. In fact, American owners of Israel. Israeli owners of America. Let's get it right when dealing with the Zio bots. How does it benefit us? It doesn't benefit us in any way, shape or form, does it? It just costs an enormous amount of money and wastes British lives. So we followed America into, Iraq again, second time. How did we benefit from that? We didn't. Went in the first time with Desert Storm. How did we benefit from it? This country didn't benefit from it in any way, shape or form. We went into Afghanistan. We didn't benefit from it in any capacity. It just cost us an enormous amount of money and hundreds of dead. Same with Iraq, and hundreds more maimed and wounded. And, great loss to civilian life there as well. If there was any necessity to carry out any military operations at all in Afghanistan, they should have been surgical strikes by air, fast air in particular, drones and special forces on the ground and then out. No nation building nonsense whatsoever. So Britain is totally on the wrong track and has been since it made this alliance with the United States over 40 odd crappy clapped out destroyers, which cost us an empire. You know, an empire, an entire empire, which we just handed over lock, stock and barrel to the US administration under Roosevelt. Yes, now that was a clever idea, wasn't it? Some people say it saved Britain. How did it save Britain? It destroyed Britain. Britain, in real terms, was on the losing side, economically and militarily, in World War II. Apparently, we're told by historians that Britain should be delighted that it was on the winning side because it has some sort of moral victory. What moral victory? What moral victory? I don't see any moral victory. All I see is disaster for Britain. The United States alliance with that nation led to multiculturalism being forced upon us. Same with all the other Western European nations. The Eastern European nations were insulated from the diversity delusion by communism, oddly enough. And they're still insulated from it, and they don't want it. But they're under the control of the US administration. They're satellite states. All of them, every single one of them, satellite states. And the US has manipulated them by ancient tensions with Russia. This is not a very clever idea in any way, shape or form for the whole of Europe. It's certainly not benefiting Britain in any capacity. And therefore, because there never has been a special relationship, let's be honest. So when US ships were running weapons, that's right, US ships authorized by the US administration were covertly running weapons to Zionist terrorists in Palestine. I know because my father was on a Royal Navy boarding party intercepting those weapons, and he was once disciplined for breaking the arm of an American sailor who tried to get a little bit too aggressive with him. My father hit him with his baton and broke his arm. His senior officer scolded him for being too aggressive. Well, apparently the Americans love aggression, don't they? So probably aggression is the only language they understood, which is, I think, where my father was coming from. And so, yes, he was doing his job. He did it effectively. That ship in particular was packed with weapons destined for the stern gun and her gun. So, to kill British soldiers with. This is a so-called ally in a special relationship. Then think forward to the Suez disaster, that calamity, engineered entirely by the US administration, orchestrating a run on the pound. Humiliated Britain and led to Britain being truly then at that time the decrepit pensioner of the US administration. Look, I have many friends in the United States and I have a lot of family there as well, cousins. I get on with them very well. I think of them very highly. Don't confuse this with, it has to be separated really from the issue of the US administration. What I'm talking about here is not just the American people full stop. I'm talking about the US administration, totally and utterly controlled by Aipac Zog. That's right, it's just a puppet of Israel. Trump, apparently, the deluded British centre-right, seem to think that he's on a mission to save Britain. He's not interested in doing anything for Britain. He just makes some lame criticism once in a while with Vance, and occasionally Rubio chips in, but not going to do anything meaningful. And this delusion that they're going to save Britain and reinstate free speech here, it's the stuff of magic mushrooms. But that's the centre-right for you. And that comes from that bacillus of Toryism. Because all of these centre-right groups, these factions around fake Farage, Rupert Lowe and Ben Habib and Tommy Robinson, they're all Tories originally, all Tory voters. And they're all Zionists and they're all puppets of the US administration. Hence the reason Bruno Boris, on his day of departure, said, stay close to the Americans or else. He didn't say or else, but that's what he really meant. I'm tired of this so-called special relationship. It doesn't exist. Now, some people say, oh, well, look, the Americans gave us Sidewinder missiles in the Falklands War. They didn't give those missiles to us. They sold them to us. The Israelis, who were supposed to be our allies, was selling weapons to the Argentinians to kill British servicemen. Where's the surprise? As indeed with the French. Well, nobody should be surprised by that in the slightest. The ancient enemy, that we actually fought in 2 world wars to defend. Work that one out if you can. Case of being on the wrong side again, is it not? But, and I'm not saying that we should have been on the German side either. I'm simply saying we shouldn't have been fighting with the French, on the side of the French against Germany. If anything, we should have remained neutral. British neutrality, armed neutrality. And I've been arguing for this for many years, in truth, that what Britain needs, and this is purely a nationalist point of view, we are totally different than the centre-right lackeys. And that's all they are. They're just the lackeys, the Zyod bots of the US administration and Tel Aviv. That's all they are. They have nothing else to offer Britain other than continued subservient slavery. Slavery of the corrupt fiat money world order. That's all it's about. There's no change there. There's no reform worth talking about. But nationalists want to withdraw Britain from NATO into a position of armed neutrality and strengthen our armed forces to ensure that neutrality remains intact. No more following the United States, the US administration, off on crazy wars. We need a policy which we adopted under Wilson in the Vietnam War. The only time Britain hasn't actually followed America off as its faithful little lackey into a disastrous war, and Britain benefited from that fact, did it not? We didn't get involved in Vietnam. Tiny amount of involvement covertly, but never officially involved in Vietnam. The Australians sadly made the mistake of following the US administration into that war. I've met a couple of former Australian soldiers who still have PTSD as a result of it. That's the way it is, I'm afraid to say. But ultimately they say there's a dire economic threat. Well, if there's a dire economic threat, by refusing to be the lackey, the faithful little lackey of the US administration, then that's further proof that the special relationships just does not exist. In actual fact, that we're dealing with a toxic foreign power, are we not? And that's what I contend the US administration is. I'm not talking about Americans per se. I made that perfectly clear earlier, that I have so many American friends and family, and I hold the vast majority of them in high regard. So that's nonsense. I'm talking about ending the so-called special relationship, an imaginary relationship. And that fantasy, for want of a better description, has surfaced more than ever before under Donald Trump, under his second administration. And Donald Trump is not a friend of Britain. He's not a friend of Britain. I wouldn't exactly say he was an enemy of Britain either, but he's certainly not a friend. And the special relationship does not exist. It's a myth, it's a fantasy. And Britain's involvement with NATO needs to come to an end. I can hear the roars of, this will let Russia through the door. No, in actual fact, it will help to end the US occupation of Europe since 1945, which has done Europe absolutely no good whatsoever. Absolutely no good at all. While ever the US administration has this overbearing military and socio-economic presence in Europe, Europe will quite literally suffer for it massively. Look at everything that's happening in Europe. When Merkel said, well, we can cope with 1 million, 2, 3 million Syrian refugees, no problem at all. Nigel Farage even welcomed them as well, remember? I made that clear in a podcast the other night. That was because the US administration was on yet another regime change operation, as it was throughout the entire Arab world, forcing people into compliance with Zionism, or else, and of course the petrodollar. And this situation, whilst we may well take a short-term hit to the British economy, the simple truth is, as much as we needed a referendum to leave the European Union, we need a referendum now to withdraw from NATO and end the so-called special relationship with the United States. Donald Trump is not our friend, neither is Vance, neither is Rubio. Forget all the theatrics. These people have not done one thing, not one thing at all. They've sent some emissaries over to interview some Brits about how badly they've been treated. Yeah, well, look, I was arrested and persecuted long before any of these people. Don't remember any American government official asking me. I do remember Russian government officials asking me about it. They actually nominated me for a free speech award. Oh dear. Yes, that's truly persona non grata stuff, isn't it? Not that I actually care, of course. I only care about one thing, the truth. And what I've said in this podcast is the truth, that Britain must end this imaginary, nonsensical thinking of a special relationship with the US administration, which means no more involvement in regime change operations anywhere in the world in league with the United States. And in fact, no more regime change operations of any description anywhere in the world singly as a nation. That we simply move into a position of armed neutrality, and that our armed forces should solely be used at this moment in time, particularly our naval assets and Royal Marines, to stop the invasion coming across the English Channel. That is the real invasion of the British Isles, not some imaginary threat from the Russian Federation. Absolutely not. It's time for the British to understand that being tied to the US administration and kowtowing to Washington the whole time and acting as its bridge across the Atlantic between other European nations, particularly in their hatred of Moscow and the Russian Federation full stop, is not doing us any good at all. It's time for a new foreign policy, and only nationalists have the willingness and the agenda, the blueprint to ensure a new foreign policy is introduced to benefit everyone in this country, not just one or two people or a small minority, but everyone in this country would benefit from this policy. And I would ask you to ask yourselves very, very seriously, ask yourselves this question: just how pro-US administration are you? And if you are, why you are, and what you actually get from it personally. And then ask yourself another question: what does this nation actually get from being a member of NATO? And I would say absolutely nothing to all of those questions. Nothing at all. It's time for the British to start making something of themselves by dedicating themselves to a policy of Britain for the British, for the empowerment of the British and only the British.